Welcome to This Explainer. You know that feeling when you're just blindly clicking accept on a massive 50-page terms of service agreement? Or maybe when you're standing in line at the DMV, literally feeling your soul drain away. We've all been there, right? You just get this profound sense of alienation because the law can feel so incredibly cold and robotic. Well, today we're embarking on a fascinating journey to completely demystify the abstract philosophy of law. We're going to explore this really groundbreaking conceptual architecture known as the Persian Renaissance Framework. And what it does is it takes that intimidating world of legal rules and grounds it directly back into relatable, living, breathing human experience. Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly does messy, unpredictable human experience harden into a concrete legal reality? I mean, it might seem like a simple question, but it actually points to a stark disconnect in our modern world. There is just this massive gap between rigid, formal laws and our actual lived human realities. For years, observers have noticed how these institutions often feel entirely disconnected from our very human attempt to create trust and meaning. And really, this core question is the catalyst for everything we are going to unpack today. So, what if law isn't just a cold system of commands? The author of our source material actually had this incredible moment of conceptual recognition, where scattered intuitions finally just clicked into place. The realization was that law shouldn't just be viewed as authorities handing down decrees from on high. Rather, law is a process of translation. It's the complex, vital work of taking messy human life with all of its immediate needs and daily interactions and translating it into shared normative structures. To understand exactly how this translation works, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to act a bit like a funnel. We'll start with law's lost human connection, then explore the Windows Zero epiphany, move on to the 7 stages of legal formation, look at analyzing law with the 5 windows, check out measuring success with our Shake metrics, and finally wrap up with reconstructing the legal order. All right, let's get started with part 1, law's lost human connection, bridging the gap between rules and reality. So, the crucial point is that when we interact with the law today, it rarely feels human. We have to acknowledge this phenomenological experience. The fact that modern legal systems just don't feel like they were born out of a human desire to build meaning. But law is not merely a system of commands. Long before a rule is ever written in some thick, dusty legal book, there's a messy human encounter that simply requires organization. Think of it kind of like a dirt path across a grassy park. You know, pedestrians just walk where it's most convenient, creating a trail through sheer human habit. And then eventually, the city comes along and paves a sidewalk right over that exact dirt path. The law is just the paved sidewalk. Before the concept exists institutionally, there's always an intuitive grasp that we need some kind of order. Which brings us to part 2, the Windows Zero epiphany, acknowledging the analyst's position. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this entire conceptual framework actually came to be. It was born on a July morning in Tehran. In a record called Journal Entry Number 0001, years of scattered thoughts on private law finally coalesced into a unified architecture. It introduces this concept of Windows Zero, which essentially demands that we acknowledge our situated existence. Simply put, you can't analyze a law from nowhere. Legal analysts, lawmakers, scholars, they don't stand completely outside of history or culture or language. You have to begin from your actual position within the world and honestly disclose the origin of your legal inquiries. Because at the end of the day, you are human, studying human systems. Let's move on to part 3, the 7 stages of legal formation, the conceptual journey. Once we acknowledge where we stand, we can trace how laws actually form in the real world. Follow the momentum of this cascading pipeline here. It starts with simple human existence. We exist, therefore we have lived experience. From those experiences, we get an intuitive apprehension, basically a gut feeling that something needs to be organized. That intuition then shapes into conceptual formation. Once a concept actually works, say a local community's unwritten rule for trading goods, it gains social recognition. That recognition solidifies into a normative order, which is a standard of behavior. And finally, that order is locked in as a formal legal institution. It is a continuous, living translation going straight from human breath to institutional brick. Next up is part 4, analyzing law, the 5 windows. This is our diagnostic toolkit for legal concepts. Let's move to and see how this builds into something super practical. How does this diagnostic toolkit actually work? Well, step 1, you identify the origin of the concept. Step 2, you understand its historical function, like what specific problem was it originally trying to solve. Step 3, you detect functional drift.
Has the law drifted away from its original purpose? Imagine an ancient tax law suddenly being applied to digital software today. Step 4, you discover its modern equivalent. And finally, Step 5, you extract its operational principle. This toolkit is amazing because it lets us see exactly where a law has lost its way and how we might salvage its original useful intent.
This takes us into Part 5, Measuring Success. Earthshake Metrics, the criteria for a functional order. So, how do we know if our salvaged, reconstructed law is actually doing its job? We use 3 metrics inspired by the ancient Persian notion of asha, which translates to truth and order. First up, predictability. Can the law create a reliable structure of expectations so everyday people can comfortably plan their lives? Second, viability. Can it remain compatible with actual lived reality, or is it just some dusty textbook rule completely ignoring how humans really behave? And third, synergy. Can it generate true cooperation and collective flourishing? By putting a huge emphasis on viability and synergy, we're making sure that the law stays a living, breathing mechanism designed to actually help society thrive. And finally, Part 6, Reconstructing the Legal Order, Translating Insights for Tomorrow. And this brilliantly illustrates that this framework isn't just about nostalgically romanticizing the past. Not at all. It's a vital, forward-looking tool for our future. It asks how we can translate these deep historical insights to address incredibly complex modern challenges. Think things like artificial intelligence and totally new forms of legal agency. We essentially have 2 key forces at play here. On one hand, we have Hafez's intuition, representing poetry, meaning, and fluid human experience. On the other hand, we have Darius's structure, representing firm order, administration, and institutional design. The Persian Renaissance Framework argues that these 2 forces absolutely do not have to be enemies. The ultimate goal is to synthesize them, proving that human experience and institutional design can, and really must, actively communicate with each other. When that synthesis actually happens, we circle right back to the phenomenological grounding we started with today. That journey from individual intuition to a concept to an institution ultimately returns to renew human experience. Law stops being an alienating, frustrating force of mere commands. Instead, it becomes a living bridge between our deeply personal individual existence and our shared collective organization. I want to leave you with a thought, a real challenge to carry with you. Can we rebuild a legal order where meaning and order are no longer enemies? The next time you look at the laws and the institutions that govern your own daily life, I want you to ask yourself if they actually pass those Ashaic metrics. Are they a living bridge, or are they just an outdated, rigid structure? The framework is out there, the diagnostic tools are right in your hands, and the journey from lived experience to institutional wisdom is really just beginning. Keep questioning the reality around you, and thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.